Mr. Chairman, you may start.
Thank you, Glenn. Is this on now or is off? It's on?
Sorry. Yes.
So welcome back, everybody. We're reconvening. We actually feel like a real television organization. Just one comment on that. You know, you do the BBG board meetings up in this sterile conference room for those of you who are on here in person, and you forget that we actually are beaming radio out and beaming TV out all over the globe. So it's kind of nice to be in an actual real studio, David, with real cameras and real lights, and you can see all of our imperfections up here since none of us have makeup on. So anyway, as we mentioned upstairs, this is the first, hopefully, of a deep dive. We're going to go through every network, every board meeting. We're going to do a different network. The format that we've chosen today, which we may adjust in the future, is 45 minutes of presentation, followed by 45 minutes of a question. VOA, as kind of the oldest and most familiar of our networks, has agreed to go first. So with that, let me turn it over to David Ensor and his team for a presentation of Voice of America. David?
Minute.
Mogadishu.
Cairo. Massachusetts.
Korea.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the Broadcasting Board of Governors, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Studio 47. Thank you for this opportunity to brief you in some depth today on the critical role that Voice of America plays around the world and the array of programs, video, audio, and web, that we produce each week for a weekly global audience now estimated at 164 million people. I also want to talk to you about some of the challenges we face, and then I look forward to your questions and those from people here in the audience. VOA's broadcasts helped bring down communism, but human history didn't end there. Today, our mission is more important than ever, and many of the regions that we reach are critical to U.S. national security. In some cases, the work we do is dangerous. The journalists of Voice of America understand all too well what is at stake.
As a reporter, if you don't go to those places, nobody would know what's going on there. If I had not been to Gao, the world would not know that Islamists were beginning cutting heads of people. If I had not been there, the world would not know that they are forcing women to wear burqa under 100 degrees. I was the only one being able to do it for VOA. I took risks, but it's part of our job.
A torrid afternoon in Azaz. The commander of the rebel Free Syrian Army here, Ahmed Ghazali, is telling foreign journalists that security has greatly improved when he is interrupted. It's a story that needs to be told. Thousands of people are dying, are wounded, are suffering. The country is being destroyed, and the world needs to know about it, even though very little is being done about it.
Journalism has become a challenging task in Pakistan's northwest Pashtun regions. There is a sort of iron curtain raised by Pakistan's security apparatus and militants. It's too much difficult to have access to independent information.
Voice of America Diva Radio Shab Qadar.
And in this struggle, Voice of America Diva lost one of its reporters.
And by the way, Idrissa Fall, who you just saw at the top of that video, is now in Bangui in the Central African Republic, covering events unfolding there. A very, very difficult story indeed. So around the world, in places like Mali, Iran, Syria, China, North Korea, and northwest Pakistan, as we saw, governments or extremist groups try to limit the free flow of information in order to impose their will. It's a battle of ideas that's also playing out in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, Tibet, and Venezuela. By providing accurate, balanced information and the U.S. perspective, VOA helps people in such places to find their own voices. In times of crisis, we can also help to save lives. What I hope to underscore today is that VOA stands for freedom. We have values. We're not neutral. freedom of speech is a fundamental American value. Number one, the First Amendment to the Constitution. And putting it into practice every day with global programming is more powerful than any propaganda could ever be, and that is our mission. Now, let me tell you who we are. First and foremost, this is a people business. Our language services are filled with hyphenated Americans, Albanian, Chinese, Nigerian Americans. They understand the power of a free press, and they are role models. They, along with Americans born here, working in our studios and our central newsroom, are motivated by VOA's mission and willing to work long hours to achieve it. During the Cold War, when shortwave was our only means of distribution, Zamira and Isabella Cioccioli listened to VOA in communist Albania. And one night they set out with their brother here. They dove into the Adriatic Sea and swam to freedom. Unfortunately, their brother did not make it. But the sisters ended up here at VOA, providing uncensored news to their homeland. And today, social media is critical to our audience reach. Here are three more of our language service stars: Sophat Seong from the Cambodian service, Chao Tran from Vietnamese, and Adi Astuti from Indonesia. They harness the power of social media to attract large audiences. And then in VOA's central newsroom, you find first-class journalists like Jim Malone and Natalia Artanza and Chris Simpkins, whose reporting in English gets translated into many languages, reaching millions of people. In broadcast operations, we have people like Gary Jaffe, who sets up remote broadcast sites at political conventions, who wires new studios, and other work that is designed to make sure our programs go out with clean signals. So we have good people here at the Voice of America. I'd also like to mention that, as was referred to earlier, that this year's report on the best places to work in the government just came out, and VOA has shown some improvement. Overall, among federal workers, there was a 3% drop in workplace satisfaction. At VOA, there was a 6% improvement. So while we have an awful lot of work to do in this area in partnership with our workforce, BBG is no longer at the bottom of the list, and we intend to keep working to make more progress. Now, let me talk about what we do. We basically do 5 things: video, audio, websites, social media, and mobile. First, video. We have 70-plus programs, everything from hard news to satire to Americana, call-in shows, health shows, election specials in Iran. And in Iran, our show Horizon, hosted by Siamak Dahanpour, is one of our most popular, with insightful programs, interviews with newsmaker guests like Undersecretary of State Wendy Sherman here. In China, if you want to see what the censors are blocking that day, turn your satellite dish to Weishe, a lively 2-hour news and information program that provides audiences what they can't get on state-run television. In Pakistan, we have a new lineup of shows, from hard news to, this is Weishe, excuse me. I was going to open up for sound there. Now we're to Pakistan. We have a lineup of hard news and the lighter side, Kahani Pakistani, that's what you see here, a program in Urdu that's getting a lot of buzz with our affiliates. It gives viewers in Pakistan a slice of Americana that they won't find anywhere else. Now, the second thing that VOA does is audio. And of course, VOA began on the radio. Look at this. Today we produce over 200 programs in more than 40 languages, incredible variety, call-in shows, health shows, jazz, plenty of comprehensive news, and special life-saving broadcasts, like during the earthquake in Haiti or the drought in Somalia. On the radio, we inform, but we also connect. By the way, shortwave today represents about 15% of our audience. It still plays a key role for us in places like North Korea, Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, and Tibet. The third thing we do is websites. We have 49 websites, nearly 500 million page views last year, and that number is rising fast. On the internet, video is a big part of the future. Our Russian service, which was booted off terrestrial affiliates by the Kremlin back in 2008, has now got this internet-based television show called Podelis, and it caters to a growing young audience in Russia's big cities. Viewers participate by Skype. They tell us by SMS and Twitter each week what they want to discuss on next week's show. Taken together, the sheer variety of our 49 websites makes us unlike any other news organization. By way of comparison, The BBC World Service, much larger than VOA, has only 28 language websites. And our sites have news you cannot find elsewhere. Just in the past few months, scoops from our Somali, Russian, and Persian services were picked up by leading U.S. networks and newspapers. Social media, number 4, is a rapidly evolving and growing news platform. Here in Indonesia, you can see that more than 1 million people have become Facebook friends with VOA. Vietnamese, one of our smallest services, with an even smaller web team, now has a YouTube channel that is one of our most successful platforms with about 2.5 million views per month. And in China, where much of our content is blocked and jammed, VOA reaches millions of people on Weibo and other sites that most Americans have never even heard of. In Iran, where the internet is frequently blocked, young VOA fans often access Facebook on proxy servers in order to watch our television shows, especially On 10, which is an award-winning satirical show that we produce in New York.
سلام، من آرش صبحانی هستم. خوش اومدیم به برنامه آنتن به تهیه کننده سامان اربابی که اونجا تو اتاق فرمان مشغوله و بقیه بچه تیم آنتن که اینجا مشغولن. منتظر تماس‌ها و خبرهای شما هستیم.
I can't leave social media without mentioning Steve Herman, the journalist that we in the building here refer to as VOA's Twitter king. This is Steve.
Many who lost their homes here were relocated to this area after a 1991 typhoon-generated flash flood destroyed their community. Now they have to decide whether to try to rebuild here or move on again.
Last month, while Steve was providing spectacular coverage of the devastating typhoon in the Philippines, he was also churning out 140 character reports on Twitter to his 28,000 followers, who include ambassadors, top journalists, and academics. And frankly, I wish I could clone Steve. I've saved mobile, number 5 in the things that we do, for last on our list because it really is our most exciting platform. It is the future. Cell phones, smartphones, and tablet use have exploded, even in remote regions. Earlier this year in Mali, when Islamist extremists seized many of our affiliate radio stations, VOA's Africa division showed how nimble that VOA can be. It quickly established Mali One, which is a mobile site that delivered vital news in French and in Songhai, the language of northern Mali. During the extremist takeover in the north, there were people on, for example, the streets of Timbuktu, who to the gun-toting Islamist fighters appeared to be talking on their cell phones, but actually they were listening to the forbidden broadcasts of the Voice of America. In Nigeria, our Hausa mobile site has seen extraordinary growth and has become our top mobile site, producing over 2 million visits a month. Also this year, with the help of the Office of Digital Design and Innovation, we introduced a new smartphone app. This app allows you to listen to newscasts, watch video, and sort stories by region. Users can send us news and images too. The app works in more than 40 languages, which is something that not too many news organizations can say. So those, in sum, are the 5 things that we do. Now, before I go on, let me try to deal with a couple of myths about VOA. See if I can respond to them, if you will. First, sometimes people try to pigeonhole us by saying that VOA is only here to tell America's story. That is not correct. Take a look at the VOA Charter, which was passed in 1976 and signed into law by President Ford. Task number 1, it orders us to provide news that is reliable, authoritative, accurate, objective, and comprehensive. Telling America's story and explaining American policy is also part of our charter, one of the 3 tasks that we have. Simply put, we are a full-service broadcaster. Where possible, that means a mix of local, regional, and U.S. international news. And without some local news in many markets, VOA would have almost no audience. The second myth that tends to crop up in our discussions is the myth of duplication. Because Congress mandated it in about 20 markets, there are 2 BBG networks. But in terms of programming, there is very little duplication, if any. If you compare, as I have done, for example, what our Voice of America and our sister network Radio Free Asia broadcast on their broadcasts in Burma and Cambodia, you'll be listening to apples and oranges. So closing one service, whether RFA or VOA in a country, would save money, but it would also mean losing something unique, and it would not mean ending duplication. Words matter. Now, what do we have to perform our mission? Currently, under a continuing resolution with sequestration cuts in place, VOA's budget is $197.2 million. That's $9 million less than when I arrived here. Here's how that divides up. As you can see, the lion's share is for language programming, as opposed to operations, news, and my office, which, by the way, includes advertising and creative services. This pie chart shows you that counting both federal employees and contractors, 92% of our budget is salaries. Now let's look at the green slice, which is $15 million. And as you can see, that's divided between travel, equipment, rent, advertising, telecom on remotes, newswire is very important, and other things. So in sum, the big cost is people. About 1,100 federal employees, and worldwide just over 1,000 contractors and stringers. So about 2,100 people all told report for VOA, work for VOA. That compares, for example, with the BBC's 8,000 personnel worldwide. We have 13 bureaus throughout the globe, staffed by Central News Division correspondents who produce content for the entire house, plus language service stringers around the world. By way of contrast, CCTV and the BBC each have more than 40 bureaus. Studios, well, we're in one. We have 4 full television studios, including this one here, and we have 6 smaller ones throughout the building. There are 50 radio studios and 30 digital production and editing suites. Our new digital master control can send out 12 signals at the same time. From the roof of this building, that's the view. And from the State Department and from the U.S. Capitol, in each of these places we have live camera feed capability. And we use those every day to produce about 1,600 hours of original video and audio programming per week. Finally, in this section, a quick word about New York. When I first walked into our 30th floor bureau near Wall Street, it looked a bit like a broadcasting museum. But now, after a major investment by VOA operations in the IBB, it looks like a major network New York bureau, which is what it is. And it's a great place to do some cool television with the Empire State Building in the background. And here you see CMOC doing just that during the UN General Assembly coverage not long ago. Let me now turn next to our audience. And after all, that is the reason we're here. Voice of America, as most people here know, is the largest U.S. international broadcaster. The latest figures show VOA's weekly audience is 164 million people. That's 30 million more than last year. This represents 80% of the BBG's global audience. And since we sometimes talk about overlap, I want to point out that 72% of the total BBG audience uses VOA exclusively. Now, to be fair, some of the increase that we're talking about this year represents better counting in places we didn't before, such as the Philippines. But VOA also enjoyed robust growth in Mexico and throughout Latin America, as well as in Pakistan. And I would just like to point out that the cost of this audience increase was 0. The new figures also show that television for the first time is responsible for more of VOA's audience than is radio. It's kind of a historic change for people in this building here. And the 17 million figure you see down at the bottom on the web may not seem like a lot, but watch that space. You'll see a much bigger number next year. For example, here are 3 services that, where we've seen extraordinary growth from desktop audiences. Persian is up 67%, Hausa 49%, and Dari up 41%. But the real success story is in mobile, especially in Africa. Here are the top 5 mobile site numbers. And here you're seeing dramatic, surging growth. The latest survey figures show that our biggest worldwide audience, interestingly, and this wasn't true as recorded last year, is in English. 34 million a week. 3/4 of those, by the way, are in Africa. The second largest audience is in Spanish. Now our second largest audience. And here are the top 10. To put this in perspective, number 10, Swahili, 4.9 million. That's 3 times as many as watch Fox News in the United States on any given day. Now, given the importance of English, we've added TV shows like On Assignment that are building an audience worldwide. And we are recruiting some new talent to write for the English website. We're also planning on offering next year a new show called VOA Now. This will be a 2-minute, quick-paced video newscast designed for all our platforms, but especially designed for the mobile phone. Here's a taste.
I'm Andre de National, and you're watching VOA Now.
I've been talking about audience size, and of course it matters, but United States national security matters more. So under the guidance of this board, under the leadership of the administration and Congress, we spend much more, and we make much more effort addressing Tier 1 countries, such as China, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nigeria, Mali, Burma, and Russia. We've devoted significant resources on these national security priorities. With your support, I will fight, if need be, to keep it that way. Very frankly, I should just mention while I'm on this that I believe VOA needs more resources for our effort towards China. The White House also wants us to work harder to reach more people in other East Asian countries such as Burma. We expanded our reach there this year by getting our Burmese news on Skynet. This is the signing ceremony in Rangoon. And that's a video dish provider in Burma that's just starting up. And we're on Myanmar State Radio with our Learning English programming. When she visited us, democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi told me that the broadcasts of VOA, Radio Free Asia, and other Western broadcasts were what sustained her during her long time under house arrest. And when Myanmar President Thein Sein visited VOA, he took the extraordinary step of going before a live VOA studio audience to take questions. And just last week, VOA was invited to establish an official, fully accredited bureau in Rangoon. Now, I need to talk to you a little bit about affiliates. They represent more than half of our audience, and they are essential to our future. It's critically important for the U.S. to be an active part of the global conversation. It's not wise to let others dominate the airwaves in cyberspace without an American voice being heard. VOA has some 2,350 affiliates worldwide. We worked very closely with the Office of Strategy and Development, adding to that roster. To some, we offer full news broadcasts. For others, we serve as a Washington or a U.S. bureau. This works especially well in places like Indonesia, with the world's largest Muslim population. In Russia, we also provide reports for the Russian Business Channel. Reporting, for example, here you see it from the Wall Street Stock Exchange. Our reports are aired on a primetime newscast which has an estimated 11% of Russians watching. VOA Spanish, as we talked about earlier, now has affiliates throughout the hemisphere. This year we signed with TV Azteca in Mexico. And the moment we signed, from the next day, about 6 million people started watching us report from the U.S. every night on their primetime evening news. So you might ask, in this time of tight budgets, are affiliate-based broadcasts still critical? Should we continue? In my view, absolutely. It's a powerful way to perform our mission. It builds understanding. It answers Chinese and other propaganda against us in markets where they are making inroads. And, oh, by the way, it's relatively cheap. And speaking of money, let's talk about our resources in comparison to some of those of our competitors. I mentioned VOA's budget's just under $200 million. By contrast, China has reportedly spent $7 billion for expansion of its media empire. CCTV has an annual budget of over $2 billion. They are aggressively building reach in Africa, Latin America, and right here in the United States. By the way, this is a photograph of their headquarters. They can afford pretty nice architecture, or interesting architecture. Programs from CCTV are not benign. If you believe their reporting, for example, then you would believe that the Voice of America was directly responsible for the recent rash of self-immolations by Tibetans, a classic case of blaming the messenger. Another major player is RT, generously funded by the Russian government, carried on 22 satellite and more than 230 operators in about 100 countries. And it offers a regular diet of stories attacking the United States. On the other side of the ledger is the BBC, with more than 4 times the personnel of VOA and 48 bureaus worldwide. The Beeb has the additional advantage, of course, of substantial revenue from advertising. Like the BBC, VOA is more than just a news organization. And one of the ways that we showcase America for the world is through music.
Welcome to Music Time in Africa, everybody.
Border Crossings is on the air.
I'm looking up Adam Lambert. That was Adam Lambert by request for Kumator Abo, who is joining us in Rwanda.
Your love is like a river flowing from my heart. Your love is like a fire that will light my way.
I've talked to Adele, Moby, Richard Marx, Gladys Knight, Boyz II Men, Natasha Bedingfield.
Hello, it's Beyonce, and you're watching The Voice of America.
Welcome to Beyond Category. I'm Eric Felton.
I love the effects on the horn. Can't hear so much great music from you guys without wanting to get in on the act myself.
This is Jimmy Cliff. You're watching VOA.
Camina, camina.
Algeria. Oh, yeah. Cabo.
So we have some fun with that. Willis Conover, who was the late, great jazz host on Voice of America, used to say that jazz is the music of freedom. A couple of weeks ago at the White House, President Obama honored the legendary musician Arturo Sandoval, among others.
As a young man in Cuba, Arturo Sandoval loved jazz so much it landed him in jail. It was the Cold War, and the only radio station where he could hear jazz was the Voice of America, which was dangerous to listen to. But Arturo listened anyway. Later, he defected to the United States, knowing he might never see his parents or beloved homeland again. Without freedom, he said, there is no life. And today, Arturo is an American citizen and one of the most celebrated trumpet players in the world.
And American music is still a powerful form of soft power for our nation, and it is a priority for this organization, Voice of America. We also have a strong reputation for programming on health. In Haiti and in Africa, VOA programs are credited with saving lives. And then there's training. Journalists around the world have benefited from VOA's expertise through training reporters that's organized by the IBB. This is another important part of what Governor Armstrong has called exporting the First Amendment, and one that I think has a lot of power. Learning English. No, sorry. This is the training.
Sur ce projet, nous sommes très flattés. C'est un projet qui va permettre au grand public de s'exprimer.
Juste, je remercie la formation qu'elle a à l'Amérique.
As I said, Learning English, some of our most popular programs here help people around the world learn our language. Or, in some cases, help them to learn uniquely American expressions.
Pinky swear. These are your pinkies. 你的小指. Pinky swear is this. Pinky swear. 你不是跟自己 pinky swear， 你要跟你对方pinky swear， pinky swear， pinky swear。Don't tell anybody. Okay, I swear. Pinky swear, pinky swear。高小姐。
OMG Mayu, the creation of the irrepressible Jessica Beinecke, has been a viral success for VOA, attracting about 40 million views in China. But it is just one of many learning English products that are connecting us with our audience. Now, since I became director 2.5 years ago, we've made significant progress in Africa. The continent now represents 35% of our overall audience, and that percentage is growing. We have several popular English to Africa television programs, and we're developing an Africa channel, basically on the cheap, using our existing satellite feed. The IBB has moved aggressively to install FM transmitters in places like Mali, where I also recently signed an agreement with an important new affiliate, Radio Claydu. In response to the crisis caused by the Islamic militants in the north, we were able to stand up a new Bambara language service. And the information minister, who you see here with me, in a speech as we opened that, became quite emotional. How it felt to him, the pride he felt, with the fact that an international broadcaster was now giving the news in his mother tongue. But it's in Nigeria, in a region troubled by the Boko Haram terrorist group, where we have our largest audience on the continent, more than 20 million people. Perhaps more than anyone else on earth, and I say this knowing that a lot of people here like their mobile phone a lot, Nigerians love their mobile phones. And in the coming months, VOA plans to roll out a 24/7 stream in Hausa called Dandalin. It's designed just for the mobile device, and it's aimed squarely at young men and women looking for news on the go and entertainment. It'll have a lot of different parts to it. Now let me go to documentaries for a second. Last month, on the 50th anniversary of the John Fitzgerald Kennedy assassination, at the museum just across the mall from here, I had the honor of introducing a 30-minute VOA documentary that was part of a special event that they held there. Here's a taste of that.
Many still wonder how the world might be different if John Kennedy had lived.
It's really sad. Our country lost a lot in November 1963, and when my father was killed. It was a lot, and I think we would have been a much better country had they lived. I'm not a believer that, you know, that out of tragedy good can come. I think a lot of pain came and a lot of bad things for our country.
The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world.
By the way, we were only able to show that documentary at the museum thanks to the amendments to the Smith-Mundt Act this year that were shepherded through Congress, among others, by Governors Meehan and McHugh, and also the then future Governor Armstrong. So I want to personally thank you for doing that. It was a great event. There are going to be many more like it, and it's thanks to your hard work that that's the case. This year we also aired a documentary on the Tibetan self-immolations. It went out in Chinese, English, as well as Tibetan. It drew praise in a review by the Los Angeles Times, and it drew a furious response from the Chinese state media. Here's a bit of that.
Tibet is a land of immense beauty, situated on the world's highest plateau. Its culture and civilization dates back thousands of years. But since 2009, individual Tibetans have taken to soaking themselves in gasoline, often drinking mouthfuls, then stepping out into broad daylight to set themselves on fire in protest.
VOA programs seek not only large audiences and impact. We seek not only large audiences, we also seek impact. And that is a pretty difficult thing to measure. But I think for example, of Shahnaz Aziz, who broadcasts on our Urdu radio service. Through the kindness of her audience in Pakistan, her program helped a poor young boy with blood cancer get treatment, a desperately blind man, poor blind man, receive a cow with which to give his children milk, and a handicapped man to complete a college degree and get a government job. So those are just 3 quick examples of one kind of tangible impact that we're proud of, and there are so many more. Summarizing, we have a clear mission, we have a strategic and we have a sizable audience, and we know we have impact. But we also know that VOA has serious challenges. They range from morale and personnel problems to resource shortfalls. We'll talk for a minute about VOA Persian. The challenge is meeting its full potential. We've had a series of management, programming, and reputation problems to deal with. It has been difficult. We've made significant progress, but more is needed. Frankly, I believe the past criticisms that Persian was, quote, bloated, unquote, are largely out of date. But the critics are quite right to focus attention on VOA Persian. It matters. We spend almost $17 million a year on it, and the U.S. government has no better way to reach out to the Iranian people. Keep in mind that notwithstanding occasional jamming, we reach an enormous audience on satellite TV in Iran. 1 in 5 adults, 21% of adults in Iran watch at least one VOA television show each week. Another challenge is for VOA is keeping up with technology. VOA's radio master control was last modernized back in 1998. The equipment went out of production years ago. Our industry generally acknowledges that broadcast systems have an average lifespan of about 7 years. So we need a way to consistently pay for updates in technology. For example, if we don't convert to HDTV, we will soon start losing affiliates around the world. Multi-year funding could be the best answer to this challenge. And then there's marketing. Our advertising budget is currently just $1 million. That's 0.5% of the overall VOA budget of roughly $200 million. By contrast, Deutsche Welle's ad budget is almost 3 times VOA's. No matter how good your radio and television shows are, if people don't know about them, your audience is going to be small. Look at this graph here. This is what happened to our online audience in Russia when we had to cut a particular internet ad budget back in February. Another serious challenge to VOA is the way international broadcasting is organized, and you talked about it this morning, governors. Mr. Chairman, as you know, I very strongly support your effort towards appointing and fully empowering a full-time professional boss, a CEO of international broadcasting. Working with our friends, we also need to reform our contracting system so that we reward contractors fairly and follow the law rigorously. VOA and our sister networks also need to combine more bureaus, stringers, and other resources. RFE and VOA have made a really good start on this together in Moscow and Kabul. At VOA New York, we host OCB, RFE, and soon MBN. There's much more we can do in this area, both to save money and, frankly, to improve our news gathering around the world. We also need to elevate visa issues in our ongoing dialogue with our friends at the Department of State and USIS. It's important to pressure China to issue enough visas to VOA reporters. We've got 2 right now, and that is not enough. It's also important for the U.S. to issue visas on a timely, reasonable basis for foreign-born journalists to come here and work for us. Within VOA, we are engaged in the challenging task of turning our central newsroom into the interconnected heart of a digital, multilingual, 21st century news organization. This highly complex reform involves a culture change that is not easy to implement. But we are excited about strengthening VOA in this way and creating what we hope will one day become the global hub for news gathered by all the BBG networks. We work with this difficult but achievable goal in mind, to make VOA so good that it's going to attract some of the best of the next generation of journalists coming on up. Now, people who know VOA tend to be firm supporters, but the final challenge I'd like to mention concerns our real bosses, the American people. Too many of them don't even know we exist. We need to do a lot more to reach out, to tell Americans how powerful this organization is, the amazing reach we have, the friends we make for our country and for our values every day. Eliot Engel, the ranking member in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I think may have said it best.
Every dollar that we give to VOA comes back to us with hundreds of dollars of goodwill for America, hundreds of dollars of good faith in what America is and what it stands for.
The recent amendments to the Smith-Mundt Act may help us in this regard. More Americans may soon hear or see us here in this country. I also think it helps that VOA journalism is beginning to be quoted a bit more often by U.S. media outlets. Some years back, VOA honestly reported on the Abu Ghraib scandal, though it was a stain on our country's honor. Today, we are fully reporting on the Edward Snowden NSA story. As we do that, we only enhance our reputation for straight-shooting journalism, journalism that does not avoid the stories that our own government finds awkward or difficult. And doing that builds VOA's credibility, something our journalists, like senior correspondent Andrei Denestra, understand very well.
Our reputation as a news organization is based on credibility. It can take years to obtain credibility, but if you don't use basic journalistic standards, you can lose it in an instant. We have a charter which simply says VOA News will be accurate, objective, and comprehensive. That is the cornerstone of our credibility. We are the voice of America, but not the voice of the American government.
By contrast, don't go to CCTV for balanced coverage on the plight of the Tibetans. Don't go to RT for insights into the web of corruption around the Kremlin. There is a global struggle underway for hearts and minds right now. At its essence, it's about freedom of speech, and it's about truth. And at the Voice of America, it's our struggle. In closing, I'd like to just say that this job that you've honored me by giving me the responsibility to hold is the greatest honor of my life, and it's personal. Probably the most important story I think I covered during my long career as a journalist was in Poland in the 80s. The martial law, the rise again of the Solidarity Trade Union, the end of communism in the first country that lost it. And it could have gone either way. I got married while I was in Poland. My wife is here with us today. And I remember her father talking about listening to Voice of America. But he did it very carefully because he was worried about who might hear that he was doing so. Today, other parts of the world need our honest journalism just as much as Poland did back then. So as I say, it's truly an honor for me to serve as your director of Voice of America for this period of time. I can also say that the people I speak to throughout this building and elsewhere around the world are pleased and hopeful because of the very distinguished makeup of this board. I think we've made quite a bit of progress in the last 2.5 years, and I look forward to much more under your leadership. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd be happy now to answer your questions.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David, and thanks for all the preparation that went into this. And we're proud, as your wife is, I'm sure, of your work and the work of everybody at VOA. So thank you for doing this. We have 45 minutes here for questions. Let me start off with the first one, and then we'll kind of open it up to the rest of the governors and then to the audience. So there we go. I'm on. My mic is on. Thank you, Susan. So I have been struggling personally with the mission of VOA since I first was nominated for this role. I understand what a role of a surrogate is. I understand what RFA is supposed to do or RFE is supposed to do, that we're supposed to be in places that don't have a free and fair media, that we're supposed to kind of serve as the surrogate local broadcaster in a place that doesn't have that. VOA has this hallowed charter that I know you carry in your wallet, and many people in the building carry in their wallet.
They do.
But it seems often to be conflicting. On one hand, it's supposed to be news. On next hand, we're supposed to tell America's story. We're supposed to present the policies of the United States. So, could you, we have limited resources. I think you very, very, very well showed up there how, BBC's funded well more than we are, and then that doesn't even begin to talk about CCTV and Russia Today and all of our other competitors. And so we have limited resources. How do you think about the role of VOA? What is VOA supposed to be doing versus the role of the surrogates? And how should this board think about it, given the fact that we have such limited resources to spread around so many different needs?
You're going to have to make your own decisions about what matters the most if it's a question of one versus the other. I hope it doesn't come to that, because I think that what both do are very, very important missions for our country. But Voice of America, look at the numbers. We have reach. We reach enormous numbers of people around the world because our model appears to be appealing. And it allows us to engage in a conversation with people around the world that I don't think you can do any other way. By getting on to, in this affiliate relationship, which is now 51% of our audience, in many cases, we're on other people's news broadcasts. We're part of the conversation that their anchors and their journalists are having with their own audiences. But we get onto the agenda that night on the primetime evening news, topics about our own country, topics about the issues that our country cares about, that our government is worrying and trying and struggling with. We help explain American foreign policy to a sometimes, frankly, rather befuddled world. So I think it's a tremendously important and valuable function that Voice of America plays. But as I emphasized in the presentation, sir, the First Amendment is what it's all about. That's what Governor Armstrong talks about. He's not wrong. That's what it's about. We export the First Amendment. We show people how to have free speech. And we do it partly by being honest about our own country, by talking about Abu Ghraib and NSA and all the rest of it. By doing that, we show people that this is what a serious country that is honest about itself does. It couldn't be more powerful.
But let me dive in just a second, just one more time. So Ukraine is obviously top of the news, top of the news today of what's going on in Ukraine, a tremendous struggle there.
Right.
And I know that a number of journalists from RFERL have covered it fantastically. A number of journalists from VOA have covered it fantastically. Everybody's doing great work by all accounts. But what is, if we're trying to define mission, what should RFERL be doing in Ukraine as distinguished from VOA, or is it just telling the same story from two different angles? So just help me understand.
Well, let's look at what we are doing in Ukraine. And I shouldn't really speak for Kevin, but I will for a second. They're doing some extraordinary work. And they know Ukraine. They're into the web and weft of that society. They're running a live video feed on the internet of the square, showing what's going on right in the middle of things. What we're doing is our regular stories, our regular reports, which are obviously ramped up. We've got a lot of more resources attached to them. On Channel 5, the most popular station, certainly among opposition-related stations in Ukraine. And we have huge audience. So we're able to be part of that discussion. We're able to put the Western perspective. When there's a State Department official visiting Kiev, you'll see that on primetime television on the VOA broadcast that night. So we've got reach to audiences right where they are. We go where the biggest audiences are. We aim high. And I think that that's a very good complementary way to tackle Ukraine and, frankly, a lot of other places in the world.
Great. Thanks, David. Any other governors have questions? Ryan?
Turn your mic on, please. Yes. Am I on?
You are.
Okay. A couple of comments, David, and then a question. First, I would commend you for your focus on affiliates and on training. perhaps the greatest long-term impact we can have for a free media in the world is building indigenous media, and over time perhaps ramping down on our own operations simply because there are indigenous outlets out there who are doing everything that we could do. So I commend you and your team for that. My question has to do with metrics. You used a lot of them.
Yep.
Both quantitative and qualitative. I'd like to know how you derive those metrics, how timely they are, and how reliable they are. That's one. The second is qualitative. You used a couple of anecdotes about impact, but impact for me is what it's all about. It's not how many people you reach in Mali or the Ukraine or Russia or China. It's what the impact is. So could you enlighten us a little on how you measure both those quantitative and qualitative impacts?
Let me start with the second, if I may, and give you another example of impact, the kind of impact that I think matters. Our reporter in Islamabad, Sharon Bain, did a television story not long ago about a hospice run by Christians, but almost all of the patients they were tending to are Muslims. And she told in the story how the hospice, after 50 years of serving Pakistan, was going to have to close soon due to lack of funds. That story ran all over the VOA system, including in Nairobi, where it struck a chord with a number of people, including some who had the funds to keep that hospice going. So through the VOA story, and we have letters from the people at the hospice thanking us, a very large sum of money was raised that will now allow that hospice to continue its good work in Pakistan. There are lots of stories like that. I just learned that one yesterday, so I thought I'd use it. But that kind of thing happens every week here. I don't know how to measure impact. I can only give, it's a very, very complicated subject. I know that the IBB Office of Strategy and Development is working on how best to assess impact. We tend to do it with anecdotes like that, and lots of them. In terms of the quantitative numbers, again, those do come from OSD, from the research that you all pay for and that Bruce Sherman and his team oversee. Is it perfect? No. Are the numbers as up-to-date as they should be? Not always. Some of them, we get new data, we have some new data now on some countries that's very fresh and pretty accurate, we think. But some of the countries are badly out of date. I need more research on China like yesterday. Like last year would have been good. But it's very difficult. Research companies don't particularly want to do polling in China for the BBG, because they have other clients in China who don't want them doing that. It gets difficult. We do have, we think, very good numbers, though, in a lot of parts of the world. Iran, for example, telephone polling is quite possible to do. Over a period of years, the numbers, even done by different companies, tend to come out pretty similar. So we're relatively confident that we have pretty sizable impact in that place. But they're not perfect, sir. They're not. And the budget for research has been cut, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, it's very important. We need to do proper research so that we can calibrate what we're doing on the air. Our Weixia program in Chinese, I really need to know how's it doing, and which parts of it are popular, so that I can calibrate the programming and make it more popular, more appropriate for the Chinese market.
Okay. Susan?
I was going to ask about metrics as well, and I think we do need to do some more work there to make sure that we're as accurate as possible. But I want to talk about Africa, and I want to draw you out a little more on that because it is such an area of potential growth and obviously an area of great focus right now with 35% of your audience being in Africa. Can you talk a little bit more about the African channel? And then I want to hear about your resource allocation on the continent versus the rest of the agency. And then also specifically, it's a three-part Africa question on Nigeria. That number's always been so high.
Yeah.
Why is it so high and the others still relatively so low compared to Nigeria?
Okay. I may get lost, so please.
channel, your resource allocation, and then
okay.
how we lift up others up to the Nigeria level.
Right. Channel. We're doing the channel because we can do it so cheaply. That's a simple answer. We can do it without additional cost.
How's it working, though?
We're just beginning to get it sort of ramped up. Basically what we're doing is we're taking a satellite channel. I mean, I used to sit in the embassy in Kabul when I was a diplomat watching the Africa channel because it happened to come in and the Armed Forces Television put it into our TVs. And most of what I saw was please stand by, you know. And I thought to myself, that's a waste, you know. So what we're doing is channel by satellite feed by satellite feed. We're turning them into cheap and cheerful channels by putting in interstitials, by putting in some extra programming, by figuring out some acquired programming that can fill, and by upping our game. So in the Africa channel, basically what the goal is as African cities become wired for cable, we want to be a channel on their cable bouquet. And we're talking to, you know, and OMPP is talking to the people who run those cable channels. We want to be part of that, what's offered to big African cities. So that's that one. The second one was
your resource allocation. How much money are you spending on?
Well, we're you know, for example, we're this mobile innovation that we're Dandala that we're trying in Hausa shortly. I mean, frankly, it's running on ether. We're stealing things here and there. We're running on very, very small amounts of funds. I'm very excited about what I think we can do with it. I hope to come back to you, you know, not too long after it starts and say, wow, you know, let's talk resources, because this is really working. I hope to be able to say that. I guess one thing I would say about why Nigeria is so big, the Hausa service is very, very good. And it fits a niche that I think maybe others have not filled as well as Voice of America has. We're just huge in Nigeria. I went there and I was treated like, you know, some kind of big deal, which was a bit of a shock to me. But it really matters. Part of the reason, I think, is that Nigeria has a law against international broadcasters having licenses. We can't have FMs there. And the very fact that they exclude us in that way means people go to the trouble of finding us, whether it's on shortwave or some other, you know, through the internet, through the mobile offerings. I think actually by having that, I think rather out-of-date law, Nigeria makes us popular.
Ken?
Sir.
Okay, first, I think all of us were very deeply moved. This was an incredible video, getting the message of freedom out, seeing the heroic efforts of the journalists and obviously those fighting for freedom as well. The issue I'm trying to think about are places, is the issue of the content we're doing in the broadcast outlets in particular. One, there are other U.S. media outlets out there doing similar things, and I was wondering in particular about the focus on U.S. pop music today, which we're in a different era than we were in the days of Willis Conover, and also the English language instruction. How you view that, particularly as we focus on impact in this era of very tight budgets, and whether that's the optimal use of those resources.
Well, we've since I became director, we've put 2 or 3 new music television programs on the air, and they're not very expensive to do. Stations love them. They are a bit of Americana. I mean, it is one of the things that America has sort of offered to the world, some pretty strong music strains, whether it's jazz or rock and roll or various other kinds of music that kind of came from here, you know, and people like our blend of it. I have to say to you, I'm not a big bubblegum music fan myself. I was in Mali and I was listening to our stream, and frankly I was thinking, what's all this LA stuff? Here's a very musically sophisticated place. We should be playing more of their music. And we're doing that now. We have a weekly show in Bambara that features some of the local music as well as ours. We do have a strong tradition in African music, which you saw one of the people, our ethnomusicologist, who's just wonderful, who broadcasts in that way. So it's a way of tying us together with the African people. Much of our music comes from them anyway, if we're honest. And so I think it's a powerful tool for us, a way to connect with the rest of the world that just opens certain kinds of doors and pulls in certain kinds of young audiences that we want to get, and starts some kind of a conversation with them that I think is powerful. So even in a time of tight resources, I'm all for music. In terms of learning English, I wish we had more resources. I'd like to see us move some in that direction because I think there's incredible potential there. We're very good at it, though, and we're getting better fast. The human communication revolution that's kind of underway right now with the tablets and the mobiles and all that is just a natural for learning English. And we're producing some new products for those platforms. I'd like to do much more than we are, but we're doing a lot. I think a lot of growth potential in that particular area. So thank you for that question.
Thanks. First, David, I wanted to commend you and your colleagues for a terrific presentation. It really gave me a good new perspective on VOA. I think one of the common themes in the presentation and that you're hearing in the questioning here is the strategic allocation of your resources. And I wouldn't substitute my judgment for yours, but I was in the Middle East last week in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and looking at the proliferation of Arab language networks there, particularly Al Arabiya and Sky News Arabia. And then I was in Pakistan a couple days earlier where they have now 80 networks. And it just makes me wonder, some of those are helping us do this job. It's what Ryan referred to, I think, as ramping down. The quality of those news organizations is improving. Even in Pakistan, I was surprised at some of the objectivity, some of the willingness to challenge the government. And I wonder, as part of your strategic vision, if you see areas where we should be ramping down now, where we could take money that's being spent in places where maybe old VOA was more effective and has paid off in some ways, and focus it on some of these new and emerging strategic challenges.
Wow, that's a really put me on the spot question. Well, I mean, we closed our Croatian service last year. And it was, kind of a bittersweet moment for people at VOA, but it was the right thing to do. Croatia is now a member of the European Union. They joined NATO some time ago. Their media is robust. I go there a lot. I know how robust it is. So it was the right thing to do, and those resources were reallocated, as they should have been. I think if we went, service by service through VOA, we could probably find a few more where it might be time to think about that, although each service is here for a reason. Each service was put here, frankly, by people in Congress and people on the board who felt it had a mission that we needed to perform. They are all performing missions which, in one way or another, less or more, are valuable. But you're right. There's a cost. There's a kind of a if it's a choice we have to make. I'm ready to make those choices with the board.
I'd just add, I think those are really tough choices, and particularly because services tend to have their patrons, particularly in Congress, but it has to be made. One of my other stops last week was at BBC World Service, where Peter Horrocks talked about the difficulty that they're confronting. Their money is going to be reduced next year. They're not getting any money from the FCO, and they're going to have to make hard choices. I suspect that those same hard choices would be useful here.
Yes, of course, I'd give anything to have the advertising budget that Peter Horrocks has, the 48 bureaus he has. I mean, they are the gold standard in a way of what we do. I do think in some areas of the world we're better than they are, but all of the international broadcasters are facing these kinds of choices. We had a meeting in Paris a few weeks ago, the annual meeting of the Directors General. It's called 7 now. And we're all talking about the same thing. What do you do with less? How can we do more with less? What are we going to do? How long is shortwave going to be good, and where is it still important? All those kinds of questions, all 7 of them are tackling. And it's not easy. But I'm actually kind of it may sound Pollyanna-ish, but I'm kind of an optimist about what we're doing here. The communications revolution is just a huge opportunity for us. I mean, the tablet, my God, it's a fantastic platform with which to present information, news, information, music, anything you want. So I see a lot of opportunities in our business, as well as the problems and the reduction of resources. And some of them aren't that expensive to do, although, frankly, we do, television is the largest growth area we have right now, and that is expensive, as Brian will tell you. It's not cheap to do it well.
So I want to echo the comments before about thanking you for the presentations. Very good, appreciate it. Also, if you think the Assistant Secretary's question was tough, I'm going to go beyond. I also have a series of questions. By the interest of sharing the mic, I will only ask one at a time and then jump in again. Starting with the number one on the issue of the mission. You reiterated the charter, and I have the charter at my desk right there next to my monitor, so I see it every day that I'm working. It is very important to me. One thing that I find very important to realize is that the charter is from the 70s, and we're in a very different world. It was a very different information environment. It was a very different USIA at the time. VOA had a very different mission. You didn't have the same relationship with the grantees that we have today. You didn't have the same effort to export the First Amendment that you had in the decades prior to the 70s and today. I would also say that, as you note, and it's not just you, BBC is the gold standard, and you compare us to the BBC. The BBC, as was starkly put in contrast for me at the DG7, whatever that was, 2 weeks ago, last week, I'm not sure. We are very much not like the BBC. In fact, each of the other DG7s are very much, each of the other members of the DG7 are very much unlike us in that it is inherently our business, our intent as enshrined in the legislation from its original draft in 1945 through the present version, that we intend to put ourselves out of business by opening up and enabling local free flow of news and information. That is not the interest of the BBC, it's not the interest of Deutsche Welle, Radio Netherlands, CCTV, Russia Today, or anybody else. This makes it very different. So I'm wondering, how then do you reconcile the present information environment, the demands and requirements of the Board of the United States National Security, which all emphasize this in varying degrees. I think at some points we've forgotten that fact, that we are not a news system, we are not a CNN. Our intent is not to continue to be out there, and this is one reason why we continue to shift what countries we're going to be in and why it should be part of the calculus of whether to be in a country and how much to be in a country. I also think it gets into the calculus of how do we examine the granularity, if you will. Do we look at engaging an audience or defining an audience through language, through platform, however you want to look at it. But the heart of this question, and again I have others, is how do you reconcile this modern information requirement with the 1977 Charter? Because to me they're very different, and this is also related, I feel, to the mission as it's perceived by the folks in this building and abroad that are working extremely hard and doing an excellent job. But it seems to me in my wanderings through and meeting with staff that we don't have a clear understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I'm curious on your thoughts.
I'm going to push back a little bit because I actually think we do. I think the people who work for me do. And the Charter, okay, it has the word radio in there and doesn't mention any other media, so that's out of date. But the basic values that are in that Charter, I think, are good today, good as they were when they were passed, with due respect. They're about accuracy, objectivity. They're about exporting the First Amendment. It may be that surrogates want to work their way out of a job by providing an example that then can be picked up by the locals, and then they don't need to be there anymore. I'm not sure whether Voice of America will ever want to be closed. I think the United States may want to have a voice in international broadcasting and media for a long time to come. That's just my view. I certainly find, as I see our impact, as I talk to broadcasters, affiliates and so forth that we have relationships with, that they want that. They want to hear what's Washington saying about this? What's going on in New York? What's happening in the entertainment capital of the world, Los Angeles? You know, and they can't necessarily afford to have reporters there. We can. So, you know, in Colombia, we were able to go to Colombia stations and saying, how would you like to have a Colombia-accented, Spanish-speaking reporter in Washington on your network evening news primetime every night, talking about the immigration debate, talking about Hispanic American culture? And by doing that, we engage those publics. We get them interested in us and in the things we care about and in our values. I think it's powerful and not really very expensive when you compare it with the Pentagon and the State Department and the many other very important but expensive things that this country does. For a matter of pennies, we reach 164 million people a week with Voice of America, and we have an impact that is just, I was Thein Sein, the leader of Burma, told me when I met with him there that he learned English listening to us, listening to our broadcasts, in sort of foxholes, in sort of what he said, boring, lousy places in my country where the troops are sent to keep things quiet. You were my companion, he said. Well, now he's the president of the country, and he's just invited us to open a bureau. I don't think it's a coincidence. So we reached at least to the people who care about the news and future elites if we reach out to young people in these countries. And VOA has, somehow the model works. It has incredible reach for the money. So I think it has relevance, great relevance today, at least as much as it had in the 70s. And I'm not sure when that's not going to be the case, sir. I think this is very, very important work. And actually, I frankly think the United States should take it more seriously than it does and spend a bit more on it.
Thanks. I know I have a lot more questions than that you do. Let me just open it up to the audience really quickly. Does anybody here in the audience, if you have a question, raise your hand and head up to the mic. And if not, anybody from the audience? Okay. Well, if you change your mind, come up to the mic, and we can keep going with other governors. Matt, I'll come back to you in a second. I want to ask another question for myself, if I don't mind, if you don't mind. So, if you had, I'm going to ask two. I don't know if I'm on or not. Yeah, there I am. The red light is on. It's counterintuitive. So, two questions, David. First question is, if the Tooth Fairy granted you more money, and you could spend it on one thing, what would you spend it on? Where would you like more resources? And a second question, I guess, on the negative side is, if you had to pick one place where you wish we were doing better and think that we haven't quite got up to the standards that you would like to set for the organization, where not, I know we have hardworking people, so not to pinpoint any specific person, but where are we not doing a good job as we should be? So where would you like to spend more resources, and where do you think we're falling short?
I covered national security for CNN for many years, and I'm kind of a national security kind of a guy. So I care about the targets that we talked about, the national security the nations that the State Department and the White House worry about. That's what I care about the most. I think those are our highest priorities. So I'd put more resources into those, frankly. I think it's great that we reach a lot of people in Latin America with a little bit in their prime time, but you shouldn't spend a lot on that. It's great that we do it. I think it's right that we do it, and we've got it about right. But if you give me additional resources, I'm not going to put them there. I see enormous opportunity in Africa for growth. I would love to do the Hausa Mobile with about 4 times the money we're using right now, or maybe even 5 or 10 times the money, because I think it could just be incredible. And it could be a model for the rest of the world. Because if we can get a mobile offering that really pulls in a young audience in the northern Nigeria, then we can do it in a lot of places. So I would love to have more funds to do that, and I guess if you're going to make me pick one place, that's the one I'll pick. In terms of where we're not, where I wish we could do better, I wish we could do better in Bangladesh, for one example. I wish I had a better sense, because it's an important Muslim country, and our service, is very small, has few resources, but I think it's actually more important than we give it credit for. China, how can we not? It's absolutely essential for our country that we be able to speak to the rising power of China and get to that audience. Sasha Gong, the head of our China service, writes blogs, and she wrote one in response to the new president of China. He wrote a Chinese dream, as opposed to the American dream, and she wrote back something quite pointed, responding to his arguments, that reached, to our knowledge, at least 16 million Chinese readers. That's impact. And that's the kind of impact I want in the country that I think is ever so important that we be speaking to. I would love to find ways to do more there. I think satellite television may be having an impact. I'm dying to have some research to find out. And I'd like to look for new ways to reach through the great firewall and get to those people. And Libby and I were talking about this just the other day. We're both of us absolutely focused on that. It's so important.
All right, Matt, you get another question.
I can throw another one out. One comment, David, is in my view, 16 million isn't necessarily a measure of impact. That's a measure of reach. A question would be how did you reach that 16 million? Because it may have been an initial 1 million or 500 that you hit, and then how it ricocheted around got to 16 million. So I'm not disputing that it had significant impact. I'm just saying 16 million by itself has a little meaning and impact. That's not my second question. The second question has to do with the website integration. I'm specifically not talking about social media writ large. That's my third question. The second question on website integration, so every time there's a breaking news event, and I'm not talking about a car chase or a white Bronco on the freeway, I go to the VOA websites, not just VOA English, but the other websites, those that I can sort of ascertain. Nobody would realize it, but I've actually studied 3 other languages, not that I can speak any of them. But, and then I also use Google Translate to try and help me, and then I get the pictures and look at the general layout, and what I find surprising is what appears to be the lack of follow-up on the website of any event, and we lag significantly behind other media outlets, whether they would be our direct to tier 1 competitors, if you will, whether it's a CCTV, Russia Today, CNNI, BBC, whatever it's going to be. And then when we do file a story, it seems that it's thin at the least, and especially when I compare it to these other offerings. And so if I want to pick on VOA English website, and you make the comment that English is a #1 audience with 34 million, it seems to me that with English not only being a major audience for you, but being a lingua franca around the world, and if we want to build VOA as a premier news and information provider around the world, that there should be a greater integration and timeliness and completeness of news and information on the web, not just in English, but I'm just curious, how would you answer that? It just seems that the web overall is, and we've had these conversations offline. How do you respond? What's working?
Well, you are talking, this is a resource question, Governor. We are a very small news organization in comparison to some of those that you just mentioned. That said, we have certain strengths. We are multilingual. We have deep knowledge of certain parts of the world beyond other people's. So what I'm trying to work on right now, what my senior leadership team is working hard on, is to make sure that when we have news, when the Tibetan service knows something that's going on in Tibet that nobody else knows yet, that we get that on the English language web desk before anyone else breaks that story. So we're trying to integrate the thing and make it the global newsroom that it can and should be. Build on that strength that we do have. We can't be everything and we can't cover every story. We're never going to match the New York Times. The New York Times, I was looking last week, they put 554 stories on their website in one day. No way. We're not in that league. We're not going to be. But we're a good organization. We have certain strengths. We're just in the business right now of posting 6 new jobs on the English web desk, because I also am worried, now that I see the numbers, it reinforces something that I've been thinking already, which is that we really have to look for ways to up our game in English. There's enormous opportunity there. It is our own language. You look at the 75% of the English VOA audience is in Africa, so it's part of doing Africa right, is getting English right. And we're really going to try to, we were constrained from even hiring anybody for quite a while. And frankly, that desk ran down and down. But we're going to build it back up. As I said, 6 new jobs are about to be posted. And we're going to get some good journalists to join the group that are already there that are excellent. It's been thin. There's no other, I have to be honest with you. When you have thin resources, you have a thin outcome. But it's a pretty good website for what it does. And I read a lot of blogs saying it's not this, it's not that. If you look at the totality of what VOA does on 49 websites in 45 languages, we're a pretty good news organization.
Well, I would ask, is there an issue here of the integration? So I've started meeting with other media organizations, news organizations, because I don't have a news background. So I want to see how they integrate their standard reporting, whether they're print or whether they're broadcast, and how do they bring it in so that it is a seamless, so they don't have a separate web reporting team.
Right.
Is there a challenge in that that the agency is essentially, or the network is essentially siloed, and so you have to be able to pull and essentially repackage the content and put it up? Because, again, I'm not talking about broadly. I'm talking about breaking news, particularly interesting and important news that makes us a compelling and useful site. How are you getting that information there?
Central News has over the last period of time built up some things called regional editors. So we have people for each region that work in Central News, and their job is to figure out, well, what have we got in my region that I want to make sure everybody knows about, and to work with the divisions, work with the East Asia Division or the Eurasia Division, to make sure that those stories get plucked out of the Cambodian service and brought to the attention of everybody. And I think that as part of the sort of reform and reorganization of Central News in English is going to require us to beef up that capability. It is a little bit, it has been historically siloed. You have to remember that this place started as the way it was organized was Central News wrote stories, and then there were translators and voices to read them in lots of languages. That was it. Now we have strong journalists who speak 45 languages and who know things that those of us born here who speak one, well, I actually speak several, but who speak one, don't know. We've got tremendous strength in this building. It's like a United Nations. It's actually fun to lead such a diverse group.
So let me just jump in with a quick observation, at the risk of being controversial, and a question, and then I think we have time for a couple more. So it strikes me as I listen to this conversation, David, and as we've gone through, that I keep coming back to the area of resource allocation, which we talked about. I think a number of us have talked about. Yeah. And what strikes me is that you look at, we talked about Ukraine at the beginning. I asked a question about Ukraine and different groups of people doing different things. I'm not, I hate to keep harping on duplication because I, come from the private sector where lots of different networks do lots of different things, and more voices are better than less voices, and so I think this issue of duplication is sometimes mischaracterized. But what I would say is what seems to be coming in loud and clear is, we can all read the papers. We see the budget that has just been passed by the Senate and the House. It's unlikely that our resources are going to go up dramatically, even though I think virtually everybody here thinks they should be in a perfect world. We're not spending enough. So we're going to be living in a world where, at least for the foreseeable future, our resources are limited. And it seems to me that we have some hard questions to answer. This is just an observation of where are things being done that perhaps we can find a way to have one organization or the other do it, save some money, so we can invest that money in places where we are not, don't have things going on. I think the work that VOA has done in Africa, by all accounts, is wonderful and fantastic, and hats off to you and your team for that. Africa is so important, as Susan and I have talked about. A lot of emerging democracies there. We're competing with China in Africa right now.
Yes.
It's going to go one way or the other, and 20 years from now, we will have either done a poor job or a good job. And so I would personally like to challenge you, and I think as we go forward in this meeting, to find places where we can save some money by maybe looking at places where we're doing other things. I think, not to pick on one, but in the Ukraine, I wonder whether or not we could have supplied programming to, for example, RFERL and not spent money at VOA, and instead not pocketed that money, but put that money into Africa or put that money into somewhere else. So that's just an observation, not a question, because I think we've talked about that. I guess my question is a more simple one, which is I lived in the UK until recently for a number of years, and the BBC is reputation. You walk around the UK and the perception. Now they have a big domestic broadcasting. Maybe that's the answer, but throughout the world, BBC is somewhat hallowed. And then you go throughout the world, and despite the great work we're doing at VOA, I think there's a perception that we're a shadow of the BBC. We don't have the influence that they have. Why do you think that is? Why do you think, is it a resource issue or is it something else? Why do you think that the view of most people, the perception is that we're not doing as good a job as the BBC might be doing?
Well, it is a resource question. I think that's evident, and you've alluded to that. They're much bigger and older. They have deeper roots, and the fact that they are a domestic network means they produce a tremendous amount of programming. I wish I had Peter Horrocks' library to run on satellites in between news shows. Tremendous, tremendous programming. We just don't even get close to spending that kind of money. The other thing I think is that, sort of two other points. One is that I think there's confusion over what VOA is. I think the American public doesn't know enough about us. And that's because we aren't on the air here, and there was a law against us even talking about our programming or showing it here, which thankfully has now been amended, which opens up some opportunities. I don't want to exaggerate that, because there's also issues with proprietary Reuters TV, AP TV, and other material that we don't have the U.S. rights for, and so programming that has that in it, there's a complexity with giving it to anyone here. But still, there are opportunities opening up for us to be more visible in the United States. I think we need to be. I think the taxpayer has a right to know more about what we're doing here and its value. I think its value is enormous. When I go to places like Nigeria and Mali and Burma, it's a pretty big deal that Voice of America's there. Get right in to see presidents and prime ministers, because we really are powerful in ways that they care about, and they actually want us to do more of it. It's also perhaps a statement about our country and the fact that people care about our country and how it interacts with them. They want more interaction, not less. There are places in the world which used to be part of the British Empire where we're popular just because we're not the British, So we have different pluses and minuses as compared to them. But part of why they're so popular is because they got this journalism thing right. They got this thing about without fear or favor, about being an unbiased news source, about reporting even things that don't make the UK look very good. We need, this is in our charter, it's what we're about. I believe in it. I'm a journalist for 32 years. I wouldn't have come here if this wasn't an organization that does that every day. But I don't think most Americans understand that. And we want them to, because it's really valuable and really important. It's more valuable than any kind of propaganda, any kind of sort of rah-rah America stuff. I mean, I love my country. And I'm, very proud of it. But one of the things I'm most proud of is the First Amendment and the freedom to talk frankly about bad as well as good. That's how you get to a better country, and everybody else respects us for that, and that's what we're exporting.
Right. Thanks, David. We have time for one more question. Susan nudged me, so she gets the question. So, Susan, go ahead.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for switching up the format, too. I think it's really helpful, and we want to continue on this path going forward. A lot of talk about resource allocation, and I think the greatest resource we have, which you pointed out, is the human capital, the really good, talented people who work here. And it's great to see the employee morale uptick a little bit, but we have a long way to go, as you pointed out, for your 2,200 employees and contractors. So I know we're running out of time, but quickly, what are the biggest challenges there, and where do you see progress happening? Because it's such an important priority for the board.
We made a real appeal to our workforce to please do the OPM survey this year. Whatever you may think of us, bad, good, or ugly, put it in the form. So, because without the feedback of the workforce, we're not going to know, we're not going to feel that we have full comprehension in their engagement. And people turned out, and we got more than 70% of VOA to fill out the form, which was up from, I don't know what, the 40s, somewhere in the 40s, I think, last time. So they really turned out, and everybody got engaged. And the numbers reflected a better view, at least a somewhat better view, of what this place is like to work, as a place to work. But as you said, Governor McHugh, there are a lot of problems here. There are a lot of, the morale is a real issue, partly because of the budget process that we all have to go through, and you know better than most. It's painful. people see they think their job's on the line, then it's not, then it is, then it's not. I mean, it's hard. And there are other issues. This place could be better run than it is, and I say that as the director, you know. It's very complicated running a big organization like this with many parts, many key players, many interests, and keeping it moving forward. I'm proud of what we've done in the last 2.5 years, and I'm proud of the numbers that I was able to report to you today. But frankly, there's a lot of areas we need to do a lot better than we are. In terms of morale, you know, we want to be engaged with the workforce. We've got this workplace engagement process that we've started, working with the Partnership for Public Service. And I'm hopeful. They say that it's a several-year process. You know, you're not going to solve it in a year. You're looking at a 3, 4, 5-year process. But they have brought other federal agencies up in terms of their survey results from bottom 10 to top 10. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that with us, but I want to work with them. They seem to understand better than I certainly do how to build a sense of engagement and positive thinking in a federal workforce. But you know, as I say that, and I talk about morale, this is the most mission-oriented place you've ever seen. People will work almost any hours of the day and night to get that broadcast out to wherever it is. They're passionate about it, and that's what we can always build on and count on.
I'm going to allow one more question since Ambassador Crocker gave me the death stare down there. So, final question, Ambassador Crocker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do know people who know people. So thank you for your candor in your response to Governor McHugh's question.
Yeah.
I think that means a lot to all of us here on the board, and it certainly means a lot to the people who are under you, that you're honest about what needs to be done, and you make it clear that your people are your priority. So I thank you for that. I also thank you for your candor in leading your list of challenges with the Persian News Network. I understand that some of this is a resource issue, and this is something the board's going to be drilling down on in the period ahead. But I would simply make the suggestion. We've talked about the BBC. You called them the gold standard. That we not try to replicate or compete with the BBC on things that they do well and which also serve our interest in getting an unvarnished story out, that instead we concentrate scarce resources on the third part of the charter, which is presenting U.S. policies accurately and effectively. So if someone else is doing the news as good or better as we can, then perhaps our focus should be on explaining to an Iranian audience how the U.S. views it and why that is important to them. And finally, we just have to speak as a consumer of both the Persian and the Arabic services. A lot of your Arabic and Farsi-speaking personnel overseas tend to listen to BBC, not VOA.
I know, and I did too. When I was a journalist. But I also listen to VOA from time to time. On the Persian service, sir, you know, it's just one of the most important things we do. I featured Siamak's program and his interviews with newsmakers in town because I think people come to our station for that. They count on us for that. They're right. We do it well. We can do it even better. The team there have some exciting ideas about how to move forward and how to build what we're doing. For example, we're putting out a contract in Los Angeles to get there are 800,000 Farsi speakers in the state of California alone. You know, that's something the BBC doesn't have, you know, and that's a whole culture, subculture, if you will, that we ought to be talking about, engaging with, and having them begin a conversation through us with the folks back in Iran. So I'm excited about where that may go. We're hoping to have sort of a youth culture-oriented show out of LA once a week. I think that'll be something that only we can do, and I hope we'll do it well. So I think the Persian service is an incredibly important part of what we do. It's not perfect, and I wanted to be candid about that. It was started in kind of a hurry some years before I arrived here, and, you know, hired in a hurry, and not everybody was really a qualified journalist at that time. I think we're much better now than we were then, and we're going to be better still under the leadership that I've selected for that service.
David, thank you, and we ran a little bit over time. It's hard to go first, so I would add my commendation. I think you did an excellent job. I'm glad that we could ask some of these questions in a unrest fashion in front of the bright light of the public and the viewers, whoever's watching, and the freezing temperatures. So MBN next month. Brian, you're up next month. I think we're going to reevaluate the format and see if we need to change this or do anything different, and we'll get back to you on that. But David, thanks for going first.
Thank you, sir.
We have 9.5 minutes to start the next panel upstairs, so please do what you have to do, and we'll see you upstairs in 9.5 minutes. Thanks, David.
Thank you, sir.